Welcome everybody to the Deep Groove Mono Summer Jazz Extravaganza. My name is Rich and I will be your host today. I think I've been a seasonal music listener for a long time, and what I mean by that is that when I think of my favorite albums, I usually think of the season that I either first heard them in or that they remind me of. Yeah, today I want to share with you all one of my favorite seasons for music, summer, and my favorite summer jazz albums. Now, what constitutes a summery jazz album for me? I think you'll find that there's a lot of vibraphone in here. I feel like the vibraphone is a very summery sounding instrument. Cool, relaxing kind of sounding stuff is summery to me. So kicking things off, okay, an early Blue Note 10-inch. This was actually, half of this album was the first to be recorded at Rudy Van Gelder's Hackensack studio by Blue Note. The album is Gil Mellé 50-20, Gil Mellé Quintet Sextet. This is a Toshiba 10-inch reissue. Beautiful obi on that. Really nice printing there. The first side has got a couple good songs. The second side I love. It's actually got some like scatting kind of female vocals provided by Monica Dell. Next album, actually we're going with Gil Mellé again on that cool tip. This is Gil Mellé Quintet Volume 2. And this was recorded later in 1953. We've got a similar lineup with tenor and baritone Gil Mellé, trombone, guitar, bass, and drums. No vibes on this one, but definitely a very cool sounding record that I can pretty much listen to start to finish. This is an original pressing. It's got some really beautiful colors here. The purple's really nice. And we've got some really clean original labels here that are probably worth showing. Very nice side 1 label there. Okay, continuing with the 10-inch Blue Note trend. Up next we have Blue Note 5042 Tal Farlow Quartet. And so this is an interesting arrangement. This is 2 guitars, bass, and drums. And, you know, when you got a quartet with just guitar, bass, and drums, I mean, I think you're sort of automatically in the camp of it sounding a little mellower and cooler and summery to me. You know, you get a lot of brush work on this album too, and that sort of creates a summer vibe for me as well. You might be curious to see this label here, and this is another really pretty original Blue Note Lexington 10-inch label. And we can get maybe a close-up of the jacket also here. These are in really great shape. Really pretty. Moving on, we got one more Blue Note 10-inch. This is going to be the another Japanese 10-inch reissue, and this one is George Wallington Showcase. And my story with this one actually is that I discovered it in the summer. I think it would have been 2015. I saw an original pressing on the wall at Academy Records on East 12th Street in New York City. I had never heard it before. I went home and listened to it online and thought it was pretty good. I wouldn't say this is the most summery sounding album that I'm going to show today, but there is the tune Summertime on it. And it is a really terrific version of it with some flute in there as well. And now I'm going to do the unthinkable and show you all a CD. Okay, we're getting into the dreaded territory of CDs for a little bit. That album is this awesome album right here, Gil Mellé, Patterns in Jazz. Here Mellé only plays baritone. You got baritone, trombone, guitar, bass, and drums. Really, really solid album start to finish. Really hard to get over here. I think the Music Matters is your best bet to get it over here on vinyl. Next up, we have an original. I have a summery story about this one, and not only does it sound like summer to me, not only did I first discover it in the summer, but it was also recorded in the summer. So that album is right here. It is Paul Chambers' Bass on Top. It was recorded in July of 1957. It's just guitar, piano, bass, and drums. Art Taylor's on the brushes the whole time. I don't know, when I hear it, I just kind of envision the Hackensack living room with the blinds drawn on a hot summer day. My story with this is that I would have gotten this also for the first time in the summer of, I think, 2015 or 2016. Found a copy at the Jazz Record Center, an original first pressing, and then got this copy, which is interesting because it's got all the markings of a US pressing. It's got the RBG in the dead wax. It's technically a second pressing cover. Beautiful cover. Always loved this album art. Yeah, the address on the back there, the West 61st Street address, is the markings of a second pressing cover. It's got the lamination, but the labels are Liberty, and it doesn't have the ear. And interestingly enough, I got this in Japan. Well, I got it from an auction in Japan, and it wasn't listed in the auction as RBG. I would have assumed it was a Japanese reissue if I didn't ask, and the seller did tell me it had it, and that's what made me think that it was an original. It had RBG in the dead wax because of the Liberty labels, and it was really cool because it's in every way it's a U.S. pressing except for this Japanese insert. Very cool. So you know, the hypothesis is that at that time they were shipping some of these earless Liberties over to Japan for sale in Japan, but they were being pressed and manufactured over here in the US. All right, so now we're going to get into some later Blue Notes. We're going to jump ahead to pretty much the end of the 4100 series. And what we're going to look at here is a little bit of organ. And the first album I want to show you, I already reviewed here on YouTube. It is Larry Young's Into Somethin'. Solid start to finish, and the way that the organ interacts with Grant Green on guitar, Elvin Jones on drums, and Sam Rivers on tenor sax, I mean, it is just a sweet, sweet sounding record. And organ's got that summery vibe for me too, just like vibraphone. I'm not really sure why, but just sounds that way to me. I had a lot more to say about that record in my review of it here on YouTube. If you want to check that out, you can go back and look at my past videos. And my next album here goes ahead to 4213. This is Bobby Hutcherson's Components. Not a record that I like the entire thing. I think for most people that have my kind of like taste that's like very much in the groove of hard bop, they're not going to really be into side 2 of this, which is very free-ish and experimental with tracks composed by Joe Chambers. But yeah, the first side is just a real treat for me. Little B's Poem is definitely the best song on the album for me personally. You know, it's got the vibes of Bobby Hutcherson, but also at times you get the flute of James Spaulding, which is a real treat. And I think flute is also a very summery sounding instrument to me as well, especially in jazz. I wouldn't recommend this whole album, but I do think it is a terrific summery listen. Next up, this has a summery history for me, for sure. This is Larry Young's Unity, the classic, right? Classic album art. This is the 75th anniversary European pressing, so this would have been pressed at Optimal. My summer story with this is that I did discover it in the summer, one summer, I think it would have been like 2018. I got an original mono pressing, of which I do not have anymore, and got this maybe a couple years ago. It does say something, discovering an album in the summer, for it reminding me of summer from that point on. There was also something about how Rudy recorded in the mid-60s that sounds more mellow to me. And also I have a fond memory in June of 2021 of wishing my fiance at the time goodbye and her getting back on a plane to Japan. And for some reason that day having this album on repeat. From that point on, I pretty much strongly identified this album with summer. Next up, another Hutcherson with vibes. This is a quartet with vibraphone, which is always fun. Happenings, and this is another 75th anniversary European reissue. But yeah, quartet with vibraphone, Joe Chambers on drums, just doing that like minimalist pinging on the ride. Okay, next one here is my last Bobby Hutcherson offering of the day, and this is Oblique, and this is the Tone Poet reissue. It's another quartet, and man, Till Then, the album opener, that is just a beautiful, beautiful, sweet sounding summer tune. There's some free-ish sounding stuff on here. There's also a pretty free sounding track on Happenings that I'm not really so into the last song, but all the other material on these albums I just love. I absolutely adore. Okay, so now I got one more Hutcherson to recommend to you all here. Yeah, this is gonna be very hard to get on vinyl, especially with this cover. I have the CD, I have the Connoisseur CD, and this album is Bobby Hutcherson Patterns. So this is a great, sweet sounding vibraphone album with flute also. James Spaulding on flute, and you still get Joe Chambers on drums. The next one is Teddy Charles, and we've got some more vibraphone. This is Olio. And my first copy of this would have been, this is Original Jazz Classics. My first copy of this would have been an original pressing actually that I found for $10 at Academy Records. Yeah, there's a couple great tracks on here. Blues Without Woe is my favorite. Tad Jones is on this album, and he just crushes it. And I love Frank West soloing on this album, on tenor sax especially. Next up from Prestige's catalog is another vibe-laced album, this time with Teddy Charles again and Mal Waldron. This is the Prestige Jazz Quartet. Very minimalist sounding record. It's a quartet with vibes, and the song Dear Elaine on here is just to die for. I mean, it is a gorgeous song that actually kind of has this foreboding sort of mood to it. It's not quite sad, and it's not quite a ballad. I wouldn't call it a ballad, but it is highly recommended. The whole album is terrific, highly recommended, but Dear Elaine especially, I highly recommend checking that out. This is an original pressing. Got some really nice printing here, some dimpled gloss, original Deep Groove label. I got this from Sweden actually. There was a website, I don't know if it's still up, it's called Swejazz. And yeah, so that's the original Deep Groove label. All right, we got a few left here, and let's continue with the vibes. And Teddy Charles, we're gonna go over to New Jazz from Prestige with Coolin. And some people call these Prestige All-Stars albums. Tunes on here written by Teddy Charles, Mal Waldron. We've got a version of Everything Happens to Me, a jazz standard. And John Jenkins and Idris Suleiman also wrote songs on this. So from a composition standpoint, it's a group effort for sure. It should go without saying why this album is summery and makes people think of summer, probably lots of people other than myself. There's just something about this cover. I've always adored it. It's just these people just seem like they're so relaxed and having fun, and these blue overlays of the black and white photography. I've always really this has always just kind of brought me peace. I hate to sound so corny, but I wouldn't go as far as saying that I forced myself to like this album because I love the album art so much. The first song that stood out to me was definitely Reiteration. Next one sounds summery. Makes me think of summer for a lot of reasons. It is out of the Prestige and New Jazz catalog into a more obscure jazz label, Progressive Records, and this album is George Wallington Quintet at the Bohemia. And this is a Japanese reissue. This has been reissued with a lot of different covers. The OJC CD has a picture of Wallington on it. There's Japanese reissues with a purple cover. This is the original kind of like aqua blue cover. That early modern typography is just so great to me. And then you get that greenish bluish overlay that I love so much. This is a nice tip-on jacket, just like the Japanese reissue here. This by the way was a Japanese reissue of Coolin. Yeah, these both have really nice tip-on jackets. You can kind of kind of see there what's going on the edges. Yep, and now this one didn't get the original Progressive label. It's got this kind of label here, and it's actually using the Prestige Trident logo, probably because this was being licensed by Fantasy at the time, who I know did the OJC. And yeah, I actually owned an original of the Wallington. It didn't cost me too much. The cover was kind of trashed, but the vinyl was like VG plus, and it sounded great. Interestingly enough, that original, they added artificial reverb during the mastering, because all the reissues that I've heard, and I've heard several of them, they don't have that reverb on them. That's interesting. I kind of prefer the drier sound. I think the Cafe Bohemia had an awesome room sound. Not only this record, but Kenny Dorham, Round About Midnight at the Cafe Bohemia. This and that are two of my favorite live jazz albums of all time. Beautiful, beautiful, slightly lo-fi, but very, very characteristic sounding recordings. Yeah, this album is killer. For a long time, I just knew I liked the whole album. I didn't really have favorites, but the first one that jumped out at me was definitely Bohemia After Dark. Dorothy Ashby actually does a great version of Bohemia After Dark also on her new jazz album, In a Minor Groove. And finally, a bit of a sleeper album that I think a lot of people might not have expected me to pull up. It's an album that was recorded in the 70s, and this is the last album to close things out. It is Cal Tjader, Live at Funky Quarters. This is a terrific start-to-finish album, of course, vibraphone, but also the added bonus of electric piano. This is an original pressing from the early 70s. It's not expensive. It's got these really kind of funny, corny fantasy lightning bolt labels. Yeah, it sounds terrific, and my guess is you could probably get this for not too much still. So good luck finding that if you don't have it. It is just highly recommended. I don't listen to much 70s jazz, and I don't collect much of it, and this is just super terrific. I am going to be posting a playlist on Spotify to accompany this video. It's going to be a summer jazz playlist. I will put a link to it in the description below. And so thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it gave you some good recommendations for summer jazz listening, and I'll see you next time.